Could the Houthi Yemeni strike on Saudi Arabia, if it's handled wrong by this administration, lead us to World War III and possibly even a nuclear conflagration? Check it out, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel, ding the bell, leave your comments, and share our story, our channel and our show with your friends. I wanted to get into the issue of the attack on Saudi Arabia's oil facilities over the weekend. On the line with us is the president of the National Iranian American Council, NIAC, N-I-A-C, Jamal Abdi. NIAC.org, NIAC.org is the website, and you can tweet them at NIA Council, or Jamal is J-A-B-D-I on Twitter. Jamal, welcome back to the program.
Glad to be here, Tom.
So give us a summary, basically, of what we know at this point. I mean, we've got this headline from the Washington Post here. The Saudi oil attacks are signs of Trump's Mideast fiasco. This is Max Boot's place. And he says, basically, Trump's Middle East policy has failed. At the root of the problem is Trump's decision to outsource Middle East leadership to Israel and Saudi Arabia. In your opinion, is that really at the core of this? I mean, first of all, what happened, and what do we make of it?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. What happened was there was a attack on two Saudi facilities that will significantly disrupt the flow of oil. It's already having a pretty significant impact on those markets, and the Houthis of Yemen, who are currently involved in a civil war, and which, Saudi, with the support of the United States, has been bombing and has helped create the world's greatest humanitarian disaster. The Houthis claimed credit for it. But the United States, in Mike Pompeo, was quick to come out and say, no, this was not the Houthis. This strike was not launched from Yemen. It was launched by Iran, potentially from either Iraq or Iran. So that's the, if you can call it a fact pattern. I hate to use that word when it comes to Mike Pompeo. That's where we're at. I think, at the risk of, identifying with Max Boot,
yeah,
I think that's the right analysis.
Yeah, if I could ask, I mean, isn't typically there's so much surveillance. There's satellite surveillance. There's air traffic control surveillance. There's all kinds of radar. Saudi Arabia has some very, very sophisticated systems that have been provided by the United States. And we should add, by the way, that the bombs being dropped on the Houthis that have now led to the world's greatest humanitarian crisis, millions of people suffering from malnutrition, on the edge of starvation. The Saudis are bombing the port through which the food comes into the country of Yemen, among other things, that those bombs all have "Made in the USA" printed on them. So, and nobody is suggesting, to the best of my knowledge, that the United States is directly bombing Yemen, although we have been assisting the Saudis in an assistance that I find pretty horrific. But, I mean, isn't there enough, radar surveillance that if it's true that these drones or these missiles, whichever they are, apparently drones, were launched from either Iraq or Iran, that the Saudis would be able to say, here's the documentary evidence, here's the video or the screenshot or whatever of our radar. You can see it. You can see where it came from. I mean, if it was the case, wouldn't it take them like 10 minutes to trot that out?
I don't know if it would take 10 minutes. I don't know how sophisticated the attack was. Supposedly it was 10 drones that were flown in. I think, though, what you're putting your finger on is there should be some evidence that is brought forward beyond just our Secretary of State saying Iran has a motive, and so we think it's Iran. I mean, this is the same guy who says Iran was behind 9/11. He'll say anything. But
Pompeo said that?
Instead of going and making this case, we've seen nothing.
Pompeo said Iran was behind 9/11?
Yeah, Pompeo has attempted to link Iran with al-Qaeda because the authorization for war is for war against al-Qaeda after 9/11. So he declassified a bunch of materials, shared them with this hawkish organization to try to promote while he was at CIA. This is something very close to him.
Wow. So how is this playing within Iran? I know that they've come out and said, no, we didn't do this. But beyond that.
Iran is denying any involvement. I do think that, Iran has provided support for the Houthis. So there's probably a good chance that there are some Iranian fingerprints on this. But the notion that Iran has command and control over the Houthis or any other group that might have been involved with this, I think is a little bit gray.
Right.
And I do, we talk about the humanitarian disaster in Yemen. There's also the fact that Iran is under these massive sanctions from the U.S. Iran is not able to export its own oil. And so, yeah, there's probably a motive for Iran to push back. But there's also this question of, well, the Iranians are actually open to negotiations. There was talk of a potential meeting between Trump and Rouhani. And I think the Iranians really wanted to see some movement on the sanctions issue before they could green light such a meeting, and now that seems to be completely off the table.
Which is another strong argument for the fact, for arguing that Iran had nothing to do with this. They might have sold this weaponry to Yemen on the assumption that Yemen would use it to defend itself against the Saudis locally, but that had they known that this was going to be the outcome, they wouldn't have done it at this point in time. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a reasonable explanation.
The other thing that I find fascinating is that a couple of days ago, Trump, or yesterday, early on, let's say early after this happened, Trump was all over this is all Iran's fault, and then suddenly he started dialing it back and started talking out loud about, or tweeting about, how America is now an oil exporting country, and it hit me. Maybe Trump got a phone call from some of the local, oil barons in the United States saying, this really isn't a bad thing for us. The price of oil just went up 15, 20 bucks a barrel. We're going to make a hell of a lot more money. Why don't you just back off and just let us make our money here? What do you think of that?
Well, I think the problem is that Trump is really motivated to have a strong economy. And if this shock has a negative value on the economy and helps to trigger a recession in an election year, that's a big problem for Trump. Right. So I think he's juggling a series of interests that include wanting to look like a deal maker, wanting to not look like a warmonger, but to look tough, the outsourcing of foreign policy in the Middle East to Saudi and the Israelis, and then the desire to be reelected and have a strong economy. And I don't think he's up to the task of juggling all these things.
Yeah, I think to say the very least. So we're talking with Jamal Abdi, the president of the National Iranian American Council, NIAC.org. So for Americans who are calling their members of Congress and saying, please do or don't do something, for those of us who are concerned about the future of U.S. foreign policy in the region, what do you think is the most useful response to all of this?
It's really important that there's a political firewall against military action. And I think that without a strong response from the grassroots, as well as, in the media, there's going to be this growing acceptance by sort of the national security class in Washington that the U.S. has to respond. There were people who are often associated with the reasonable side of the debate who, the last time there was this potential flare-up, they supported U.S. strikes without really understanding the implications and the fact that that would likely lead to this unraveling that could lead to an all-out regional war. So I really think, for people at home, it is really important to call both your representative as well as your two senators and ask them to come out on the record and push back against any unauthorized war. And they can do that now, and they're not doing it.